Greetings and welcome. This is episode 7 of Australia-China Media Watch, and here's wishing you a happy 2022 and all the best with this solar orbit. This week we're looking at news representations from the 27th of December, that's a Monday, 2021, through to Sunday, the 2nd of January, 2022. In the Global Times, there were 21 mentions of Australia in their news coverage. In contrast, if we were to head over to Sky News Australia, the last article published by Sky News Australia with relation to China dates back to December 22nd, and nothing else has appeared ever since. So that will be a score of 21 from the Global Times versus 0 from Sky News Australia. We'll begin by unpacking the Global Times. The first news article we'll be looking at was published on the 28th of December by the author Liu Xuanzun in the column Military. What's caught my attention as I've been unpacking news coverage from Global Times is the kind of strange publication and update timings. As you can see from the line which I've highlighted here on the screen, published on December 28th, 2021 at 11:07 p.m. But for some reason there's some kind of time traveling happening over here. The article states updated on December 28th, 2021 at 10:59 p.m. Not quite sure what's going on over there. We'll head into the article. The article begins with a photograph of a shipborne helicopter that's being attached to a frigate flotilla with the Navy under the PLA Southern Theatre Command landing on the flight deck of the guided missile frigate Wuzhou HAO 626 under the guidance of a sailor during a maritime firefighting training operation in early December 2021. Photo source is from the Chinese military. The opening paragraph states, according to monitoring from a Chinese think tank, the US military conducted highly intensive operations near China, including aerial close-in reconnaissance, aircraft carrier drills, and submarine activities over the past year, posing severe military threats and security risks to China in regions including the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits, military experts said on Tuesday. With US President Joe Biden on Monday signing a new defense bill that will see US military expenditure further expand with a particular focus on China, Chinese analysts predict further increase of US military activities targeting China next year, and said China should continue its efforts to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity by enhancing its national defense development and troops combat preparedness. In 2021, the US maintained its intensive military activities in the South China Sea targeting China, including close-in reconnaissance operations, transits of the Taiwan Straits, forward deployment, strategic deterrence operations, so-called freedom of navigation operations, drills, and battlefield construction activities. The South China Sea Strategic Situation Probing Initiative, also known as the SCSPI, a Beijing-based think tank, revealed on Monday in an article published in its WeChat account, written by Hu Bo, the think tank's director. US large spy planes carried out about 1,200 aerial close-in reconnaissance sorties on China, with some of them coming near 20 nautical miles of the Chinese mainland's territorial baseline. US aircraft carrier strike groups and amphibious ready groups entered the South China Sea 13 times, more than doubling the activities of 2020, and at least 11 US nuclear-powered attack submarines were spotted in or near the South China Sea, including the Seawolf-class USS Connecticut, which had an accident in the region, according to monitoring from the SCSPI. Let's have a closer look at mentions of Australia in the article, and it looks like Australia is mentioned once. The paragraph reads, other countries from outside the region, including the UK, France, India, Germany, the Netherlands, Japan, and Australia, also sent warships to enhance their presence in the South China Sea, while countries within the region, including Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia, also boosted military activities, according to SCSPI. The concluding paragraph of this article reads, the US is like a thief crying, "Stop thief," by creating so many military threats for China first, while also hyping the China threat theory at the same time, while China only strives to defend itself, Fu said. We'll move along to the next article. Also published on the 28th of December, but originally from the AFP. This was published in the Sports and Miscellaneous column. The headline reads, rough weather batters Sydney to Hobart race, forcing dozens of withdrawals. Published on December 28, 2021 at 5:20 p.m. The opening paragraph reads, treacherous conditions have pummeled the annual Sydney to Hobart yacht race, forcing dozens of withdrawals as Blackjack led a tight battle for line owners. Sunday's starting fleet of 88 yachts for one of the world's toughest ocean events was cut down to 56 by Monday evening as competitors peeled off after suffering damage or minor injuries to the crew. Mentions of Australia appear in the following paragraph. Cruising Yacht Club of Australia Commodore Noel Cornish said although the conditions had been very tough, the challenge of a great adventure is what drew competitors. A neutral reference to Australia over here relating to a specific event. We'll move along to the next piece. This next piece was published in the Top Talk column in the Global Times. And its headline reads, Biden admin loses control over Taiwan policy, mirroring loss of control at home, by Zheng Yongnian. Published on December 28th at 3:55 p.m. The article begins with an editor's note. Forget how US media outlets once declared 2020 as the worst year ever. Half of Americans are calling 2021 the worst year of their lives so far, according to a new survey by one poll. The US kickstarted 2021 with a Black Swan event at the Capitol riots. Will the world witness more Black Swan events in the year to come? In what ways can China break free of the US's unrelenting containment? Global Times reporters Li Aixin and Li Qingqing talked to Zheng Yongnian about these issues. Zheng is Presidential Chair, Professor, Acting Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Science, and the founding director of the Advanced Institute of Global and Contemporary China Studies, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen. He has recently published a new book, Opportunities in Rapidly Changing International Environment, which is part of the research series of Guangdong Academy of Greater Bay Area Studies. The first question put forth by the Global Times reads, in your new book, you put strong emphasis on the significance of opening up on China's development, while noting the US should also open up the international system to more countries. How would you describe the US's opening up? Zheng's response is as follows. The US has been stressing the so-called reciprocal opening up, but there are other kinds of opening up of the US. In modern times, it wants to force other countries to open their doors to the US with guns and cannons, like what European imperialist countries did. The US is also a country of immigrants. Since the Second World War, the US has been opening up unilaterally to European talent, And over the past few decades, it has also opened up talents from developing countries like China and India. Talented immigrants from other countries make a great contribution to the US's development. In addition, the US has also been forcing state-owned enterprises from some countries, including China, to be more open as part of a labor market that fits Western standards. The US's policies on opening up are all favorable to itself, otherwise the country is definitely closing its doors. For example, the US does not allow its high-tech products to be sold to China, nor does it allow Chinese high-tech companies like Huawei to operate on US soil. Let's take a closer look at mentions of Australia in the article. This appears first in a question posed by the Global Times, and it reads, Australia has been one of the most loyal allies in following the US's China policy. Do you think China-Australia relations would further decouple in 2022? In the 2022 Australian federal election, to what extent will the opposition party and voters affect Australia's China policy? Zeng's response reads, just like the US, Australia has different views on its China policy. The Australian business community hopes to maintain a relatively friendly relationship with China. They want to make money and do not want to give up on China's bigger market. However, the Australian government uses ideology to deal with China. The question depends on how Australia's internal political power will balance with its economic power. Just like India, ideological and political anti-China acts cannot resolve Australian economic problems. On the positive side, Australia's people-to-people and commercial exchanges with China have not been interrupted. Besides, the RCEP will come into effect soon. RCEP can become a very important leverage to promote China-Australia relations. However, it depends on whether Australian politicians will take care of its citizens' welfare and the interests of the business community, or will it simply stick to ideological positions? No further mentions of Australia is found in this article. We'll move along. This next piece was published on the 29th of December in the column Economy. The headline reads, Chinese customs fully prepares for the implementation of RCEP. Published December 29th, 2021 at 11:38 p.m. The opening paragraph states, Chinese customs said it has fully prepared for the implementation of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP, days ahead of the formal implementation of the largest trade agreement. In terms of rules of origin and tariff concessions, the General Administration of Customs said on Wednesday that it has completed 38 specific tasks to ensure the full implementation of the rules of origin and the agreed tax rate, and established the Shared Information System of visa data and customs clearance data. In terms of customs procedures and trade facilitation, the Chinese customs said it continues to improve clearance efficiency. Up to now, the regulatory documents that needed to be verified in the import and export processes have been streamlined from 86 in 2018 to 41, a decrease of 52.3%. Of note is how the RCEP is currently the world's largest free trade agreement. Its members include China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and 10 ASEAN countries. The total population size of the economy and total trade volume of the 15 member countries account for the world's 30%. In 2020, the total value of China's trade to the other 14 RCEP members was 10.22 trillion yuan. That relates to 1.6 trillion US dollars, accounting for 31.7% of China's total imports and exports during the same period. Australia is mentioned once in this article, and that relates to how it's one of the 15 member countries of the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. The next piece was also published on the 29th of December, and this one was found in the economy section. The headline reads, Australian firms strive to return to China, but their politicians still pose hurdle. Subtitle reads, Wind, Wine, Coal Companies Desperate for Chinese Market After a Tough Year. The opening paragraph reads, China has raised the 2022 import quota for Australian wool by 5% compared with 2021 as part of an existing free trade agreement between the two countries, according to the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, MOFCOM, on Wednesday, underscoring China's commitment to carry out trade agreement despite tenses diplomatic tension. Interesting paragraph here. Underscoring China's commitment to carry out trade agreement despite tenses diplomatic tension. I'm not sure if there's a typo error in the editing, but we'll keep going. The next paragraph reads, however, as Canberra continues to adopt a hostile approach toward China, many Australian businesses are facing a tough time in the Chinese market, and some winemakers, coal traders, and other industry players that have been hit hard by deteriorating bilateral ties are actively seeking ways to stay in China. The import quota for Australian wool in 2022 is set to be 40,203 tons, a 5% increase compared with 38,288 tons in 2021. The MOFCOM stated on its website on Wednesday. This increase is conducted under a bilateral free trade agreement signed in 2015, in which China grants duty-free treatment to Australian wool up to the quota level, which increases by 5% every year until 2024. Let's have a closer look at other mentions of Australia in the article. It does appear a number of times, and this next paragraph states, industry insiders said that the move serves as a reminder of the bigger bilateral trade potential, although this has been seriously disputed by the Australian government's provocative approach. This action shows that China has always acted in accordance with the market conditions. In addition, it also shows that the demand in the Chinese market is always there. Chen Hong, a professor and director of the Australian Studies Centre at East China Normal University, told the Global Times on Wednesday. In an exclusive written interview with the Global Times, Nick Coyle, CEO of the China-Australia Chamber of Commerce, expressed on Wednesday his expectation for more economic and trade ties to be unleashed between the two countries. The key driver here is complementaries, Coyle said, noting that Australian consumers continue to buy quality Chinese goods, including vehicles, technology, and other high-quality finished goods, while there has been strong investment from China into healthcare-related industries. Several traders and business representatives in sectors such as wine and coal told the Global Times on Wednesday about their growing efforts to sustain market share in China amid deteriorating relations. As Australian businesses are groping for ways to restore their business interests in China, varied measures have been adopted, including using third countries and regions or seeking cooperation with Chinese partners. The Australian wine businesses in China has come across what would be the biggest hurdle in decades, with anti-dumping tariffs of up to 218.4%. A wine trader surnamed Lin, based in South China's Guangzhou, said that to avoid tariffs, some Australian wine brands are investing heavily in vineyards in the US and South Africa, but many of those products are ultimately going to China. There have also been cases of Australian wine merchants trying to gain share in the Chinese market in cooperation with Chinese wineries, the insider said. Traders dealing with Australian coal, another major export, Reliant Good, are also seeking business opportunities in China, where the sector's trade has come down to a puny level after domestic buyers diversified their sources of supplies from countries such as Russia, Mongolia, and the US to fend off the risks of the soured relations. We'll have a look at the concluding paragraph of this article. Coyle hopes that with increasing global mobility as the world emerges from COVID-19, both China and Australia will see a two-way return for students and tourism, as well as Australia's traditionally strong performers in mining, energy, and agricultural trade with China. However, that will depend on whether the Australian government can change its hostile approach toward China. Australian politicians should respond to the calls of their own companies and strive to restore trade between the two countries to normal levels as soon as possible, Chen said. We move along to the next piece. Published on the 29th of December, originally by Reuters, this piece headline reads, "Virus cases surge around world. Countries rethinking quarantine and test rules." We'll have a look at mentions of Australia, and appears in the opening paragraph. Daily COVID-19 infections have hit record highs in the US as swaths of Europe and Australia as the new Omicron variant of the virus races out of control, keeping workers at home and overwhelming test centers. Australia is mentioned again in the following paragraph. New daily infections in Australia spiked to nearly 18,300 on Wednesday, eclipsing the previous pandemic high of around 11,300 a day earlier. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said his country needed a gear change to manage overburdened laboratories, with long walk-in and drive-in queues reported in a number of areas. Australia appears once again in the following paragraph, a quote, We just can't have everybody just being taken out of circulation because they just happen to be at a particular place at a particular time, Australia's Morrison told reporters. The concluding paragraph of this article states, early data from Britain, South Africa, and Denmark suggests there is a reduced risk of hospitalization for the Omicron compared with the Delta variant, the World Health Organization said in its latest epidemiological report released overnight. Published on the 29th of December, this next headline reads, Australian anti-China sentiment may still poison Port of Darwin agreement. Opening paragraph is as follows. An Australian Department of Defence review has reportedly found no national security grounds to recommend the federal government overturn the 99-year lease of the Port of Darwin to Chinese company Landbridge, Australian media outlets report on Wednesday. The result of the review has to some extent proved the innocence of the Chinese firm's Darwin Port lease. The 99-year lease is only a commercial contract. In recent years, Darwin's military value to the US and Australia has increased, along with attention paid to the port. More importantly, with ties between China and Australia deteriorating, Canberra is politicizing and maliciously hyping almost all China-related issues. but Chinese firm's Darwin port lease is a symbolic example. The next paragraph. The agreement was signed between China's Land Bridge and the Northern Territory government back in 2015. The Australian federal government is politicizing and interfering more with the local government's cooperation with China. For example, the Australian federal government tore up Victoria's Belt and Road agreements with China in April, and in May, Prime Minister Morrison asked for an urgent review of the Port of Darwin agreement. Many of Australia's hawks played a big role in such moves. When reporting the news, the Daily Mail, a British media outlet, published an article why Australia may never get the Port of Darwin back from Beijing, as bureaucrats find there is no national security risk to the deal, despite China trying to tank the Aussie economy. Such rhetoric is an attempt to drive a wedge between China and Australia. The US has made a lot of progress in ramping up cooperation with Australia this year. The UK, has made a lot of progress in ramping up cooperation with Australia this year, including signing the AUKUS deal in a bid to contain China's rise. In this context, some forces in Britain may be reluctant to see any positive cooperation between China and Australia. The rhetoric also reflects the mentality of certain forces in Australia, especially the anti-China hawks. The Australian noted on Tuesday the review is understood to have disappointed China hawks, who were hoping the review would trigger a reversal of the decision and allow the government to unpick the lease agreement. The concluding paragraph states, in terms of guiding Australian public opinion, these hawks have played a bad role. The foundation of China-Australia relations is sound, but the anti-China hawks have always been hyping the China threat and misleading the public. This should bear a large part of the responsibility for the precipitous drop in China-Australia relations. I believe this is a clear instance of finger pointing, an example of the othering offensive at play. We'll keep going to the next piece. Published on the 29th of December, originally by Reuters. This headline, Australia seeks to ease COVID-19 test rules as cases hit records, was found in the Asia Pacific column. The opening paragraph states, Australia will seek to make urgent changes to COVID-19 testing rules to ease pressure on test sites as infections surged and the country's most populous state reported a near doubling in daily cases. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said on Wednesday Australia needed a gear change to manage overburdened laboratories and get people out of isolation. He called a snap meeting of the National Cabinet on Thursday. We just can't have everybody just being taken out of circulation because they just happen to be at a particular place at a particular time, Morrison said during a media briefing. The concluding paragraph of this article is as follows. After seeing long lines at other testing hubs, he settled for a rapid antigen test at home, but with soaring cases, he is concerned he might struggle to get a PCR test as required ahead of his next chemotherapy appointment on January 11th, 2021. Not exactly painting Australia in a positive light, but not an overt case of othering. We'll move along to the next piece, published on December 29th as well by Henry Church. This was found in the sports column, and headline reads, Denying the virus victory, COVID-19 threatens 2022 sports. The impact of COVID-19 continues to be felt on the sporting calendar, and it has already suggested that it will continue to do into 2022 as it looms large over some of the biggest events of the year, the opening paragraph states. The next paragraph is as follows. English Premier League football's usually hectic festive fixture schedule has been hit hard and guaranteed a future headache to reschedule matches. While there are fears that Australia's impending whitewash of England in the Ashes will be curtailed by COVID-19, affecting the last two tests rather than any resistance from the already defeated tourists. Australia is mentioned again in the following paragraph. Tennis players are landing in Australia for the first Grand Slam of 2022, the Australian Open, and already there are COVID-19 concerns. No further mentions of Australia in this article, and at first glance, a neutral reference. We'll move along to the next piece. Originally published by the AFP, this was published on December 29, 2021 at 7:27 p.m. In the sports column, this headline reads, England must reset button after Ashes debacle, says former bowler. Opening paragraph, former England bowler Steve Harmison said the test team must hit the reset button as a searching inquest began into the humiliating Ashes capitulation in Australia. The next paragraph, Joe Root men were bowled out for paltry 68 on Tuesday as they slipped to an innings defeat in the third test in Melbourne, handing Australia an unassailable 3-0 lead in the 5-match series. It was the latest in a string of woeful efforts with the bat. England have not once reached 306 innings in Australia. We'll move along to the next article. By the author Chen Si, this headline reads, Chinese-Belgian artist chases his dreams. Published December 29th at 6:53 p.m. And the opening paragraph states, before coming to China, Chinese-Belgian artist Zheng Tianyou never thought he would be able to get so close to his life's dreams, directing a film based on one of his creations before the age of 50. A storyboard artist by trade, the 35-year-old has gotten a step closer to making his dream a reality by directing the second season of the animated TV series Kung Fu Wa for Tencent Video. I thought China was like in the Western movies where everybody does Kung Fu, but I realized that was a big fake impression in my mind after I came here when I was 15 years old for a vacation, Zheng told the Global Times, recalling his initial impression of the country that has now become his second home. Curious about the Chinese language, Zheng returned to China again in 2011 to study the language and animation at the China Academy of Art in Hangzhou, East China's Zhejiang province. This allowed me to learn Chinese and stay in an artistic environment at the same time. Australia is mentioned over here in a single paragraph. It is really amazing the way China has handled things. I think every country should do the same, but in Europe it's definitely not great. I have friends in Australia, France, and the way they talk shows that their government is not dealing with the pandemic in a good way, he added. This is in reference to Zheng returning to Belgium for vacation in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic in Belgium had started to worsen. He then mentions, I was really lucky to make it back to China on March 25th, 2020, just 3 days before China closed its borders. We'll move along to the next piece. This next headline reads, Blackjack takes the honours at last in Sydney to Hobart yacht race. Published on December 29th, 2021 at 6:38 p.m. Opening paragraph states, Supermaxi Blackjack won the prestigious Sydney to Hobart yacht race on Tuesday, ending years of frustrating near misses. Owned by Australian Peter Harburg and skippered by Mark Bradford, Blackjack took line honours after a tight tussle with Law Connect on the River Dermot after 2 days, 12 hours, 37 minutes and 17 seconds of racing. Australia is mentioned again in the following paragraph. It was Harburg's first win in the race after several times falling short, and comes in a boat named after Australian F1 legend and three-time world champion Jack Brabham, who was also a friend of his. A neutral reference to Australia in relation to a specific event, and we'll move along to the next piece of coverage. Plenty of action happening on the 29th of December. This next one comes in on the 29th of December as well. China raises import quota for Australian wool in 2022 despite the economic coercion claim. This appeared on at 6:16 p.m. on the 29th of December. Opening paragraph states, China has raised the import quota for Australian wool in 2022 by 5%, according to the joint statement released by the China's Ministry of Commerce and General Administration of Customs on Wednesday. Industry Insider said that the move is a direct reflection of China's active response to the market demand, instead of using so-called economic coercion in the bilateral trade, as some Australian government officials have claimed. The import quota for Australian wool in 2022 is set to be 40,203 tonnes, a 5% increase compared with the 38,288 tonnes in 2021. According to the website of China's Commerce Ministry on Wednesday, despite worsening bilateral relations created by the Australian government that have casted a shadow of uncertainty on a number of export-oriented Australian goods, including wine, beef, and barley. The quota has been on a 5% increase year on year against the backdrop of the bilateral trade agreement signed in 2015, according to media reports. I think what the article is trying to stress over here is that despite how bilateral relations have not gotten better, there is a single instance of Chinese action that goes counter to the claim that China is engaging in a so-called economic coercion or trade war with Australia. We'll move along to the next piece. Published on the 29th of December, originally in Xinhua, this was found in the World/Americas column. The US most responsible for fast global spread of COVID-19 research report. A research report titled US responsible for global spread of COVID-19 was jointly released by the Intelligence Alliance think tank and the Taihe Institute on Friday. According to the report, data from multiple sources have shown that the United States is most likely the country where COVID-19 originated and the country most responsible for the fast global spread of the virus. Its political manipulation of the disease has made the global anti-pandemic efforts particularly difficult and challenging. Australia is mentioned in the following paragraph. And for a bit of context, I'll go to the paragraph before it. According to data released on the National Tourism Office of the United States from April 2020 to March 2021, a total of 23.195 million citizens traveled abroad via air and land. From November 2020 to January 2021, the United States witnessed a peak in the pandemic with an average of daily confirmed cases reaching 186,000, while the number of citizens traveling abroad also reaching a high point of 87,000 per day. The overlapping peaks resulted in the rapid spread of the pandemic from the United States. According to reports, 30% of the 7,000 imported cases in South Korea and 14% of the 6,000 confirmed cases in Australia were from the United States. Australia appears once again in the following paragraph. Their study published in Science found two particular genetic fingerprints of viruses associated with a conference, and then tracks those lineages across the United States. One was spread from Boston to 29 US states as well as to other countries, including Australia, Sweden, and Slovakia. No other mentions of Australia is found in the article. This next piece has the headline White Paper, China's Export Controls. Originally published by Xinhua on December 29th, 2021 at 10:14 a.m. The opening paragraph reads, the State Council Information Office of the People's Republic of China published a white paper titled China's Export Controls on Wednesday. We'll take a closer look at mentions of Australia, and it looks like it appears once. And for setting the context, we'll begin with the prior paragraph. China has maintained communication and exchanges with the Wassenaar Arrangement. The two sides have held 5 rounds of in-depth dialogue on control principles, lists, and best practices pertaining to the export of conventional arms and relevant dual-use items and technologies. China has been involved in 6 rounds of consultation with the Australia Group AG on biological and chemical non-proliferation, implementation of the CWC and the BWC, and operation of the AG. The following paragraph states, China is willing to work with the international community to ensure that multilateral export control mechanisms are just and open, and to increase the diversity and breadth of representation in their membership. China upholds solidarity and cooperation, opposes discriminatory approaches, and advocates that all countries work together to address serious global issues and create a brighter future for humanity. No other mentions of Australia is found in this piece. The next headline reads, RECP to take effect on first day of 2022, extend Asia-Pacific industrial chains in closer bond. Published on the 30th of December at 10:47 p.m. The opening paragraph states, the world will see the establishment of its largest trading bloc, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership RECP, from the beginning of 2022. And Chinese government officials announced on Thursday a piece of news that not only brings hope after a year battered by the pandemic, but also a glorious victory of multilateralism and boosts trade prospects for countries in the Asia-Pacific region. From customs officials and entrepreneurs to academics, China has been gearing up for the start of the mega trade pact, which will see tariffs end on more than 90% of the commodities traded in the region, either immediately or in stages, with companies under the RECP umbrella holding high hopes for incremental investments and trade as a result of the agreement. So far, China has been making preparations to implement all 701 binding obligations stipulated in the agreement, Vice Minister of Commerce Ren Hongbin said on Thursday during a press conference, stressing that rolling out the general market under the RCEP agreement will effectively offset the negative impact brought on the economy by the pandemic. mentions of Australia appear in the following article, in the following paragraph. Apologies. The agreement will come into effect initially for 10 countries, 6 ASEAN countries, economies including Laos, Thailand, and Singapore, as well as 4 non-ASEAN members, China, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia. In total, 15 Asia-Pacific countries signed the RCEP agreements in late 2020. Australia is mentioned once again in a caption that accompanies the infographic, attempting to explain how will the RCEP boost the economy. And the subtitles, or the captions, apologies, read: the RCEP will come into effect on January the 1st, 2022, marking the formation of the world's largest free trade zones in terms of trade volume. The agreement will come into effect in the first batch of 10 countries, 6 ASEAN members, and China, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia. Australia is mentioned again in a following later paragraph. Chinese Ministry of Commerce, MOFCOM, spokesperson Gao Feng said on Thursday during a press conference that starting from January the 1st, more than 65% of the goods traded between China and ASEAN members, Australia and New Zealand will be tax-free. Furthermore, 86% of goods exported from Japan to China will eventually be tax-free, while the same will apply to 88% of products exported from China to Japan. Australia is mentioned in another paragraph, and that reads: for example, it's possible that Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam will participate in the existing wool processing supply chain, with Australia providing wool material, China processing semi-finished fabrics, Vietnam making them into clothing, and Europe or the US becoming the end client. Gu Xiaosong, Dean of the ASEAN Research Institute of Hainan Tropical Ocean University, told the Global Times on Thursday. The concluding paragraph of this article reads: despite obstacles like the protectionism trend and US crackdown measures, China will not slow down in opening up its market. And as long as China's market is open, overseas company will surely come as a result of the appeal of China's huge market. There is no turning back in terms of economic integration and globalization, he said. Published on the 30th of December, an infographic: How will RCEP boost the economy? By Jin Jianyu and Xu Zihe, published 30th of December at 7:33 p.m. In this infographic, there's an editor's note stating how this agreement, which comes into effect on January the 1st, 2022, marks the formation of the world's largest free trade zone in terms of trade volume. So the RCEP is expected to scrap as much as 90% of the tariffs on goods traded between its signatories over the next 20 years. In terms of the proportion of goods which will be traded with zero tariffs between China and the other signatories, if we look at ASEAN, Australia, and New Zealand, there will be over 65% of goods which will come with zero tariffs. When it comes to South Korea, that's between 39 and 50%. And when it comes to Japan, that percentage looks like it's between 25% and 57%. We'll move along to the next piece. Published on the 30th of December, in the society section of the paper, this headline reads: Foreign reporters should feel fortunate for living in China during pandemic. Chinese Foreign Minister. Foreign media reporters should feel fortunate for being able to live in China during the COVID-19 pandemic, as China is blameless on the epidemic, Chinese Foreign Minister spokesperson Zhao Lijian said at Thursday's press conference. Zhao's remarks came after people in Mexico and other Latin American countries signed an international legal claim against China and the World Health Organization, asking for compensation for pandemic losses. You foreign reporters seated today have experienced China's battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, Zhao said. Chinese people have triumphed over the epidemic strategically, and all of you should feel fortunate for being able to live in China during the pandemic, Zhao said, noting accusations against China over COVID-19 are just a farce. Despite regional resurgence, China remains intact before the challenges brought about by the Omicron variant. In contrast, the US, the UK, France, Australia, and other countries are shattering records for daily new cases. Australia is mentioned once in this article for reference, relating to how, just like the US, the UK, and France, Australia belongs to a group of countries shattering records for daily new cases for the Omicron variant. We'll move along to the next piece. Published on the 30th of December at 2:02 p.m. This next headline reads, RCEP to come into effect in 2 days. China may become recovery locomotive in largest free trade bloc. The opening paragraph states China is ready to implement the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, marking a remarkable end to 2021 and opening much space to the imagination about the trade prospects of China as well as other members of the trade agreement. The RCEP will come into effect on January the 1st, 2022, marking the formation of the world's largest free trade zones in terms of trade volume. The agreement will come into effect in the first batch of 10 countries, 6 ASEAN members, and China, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia, a Chinese Commerce Ministry official said during a press conference on Thursday. Australia is mentioned again in the following paragraph. A total of 15 Asia-Pacific countries signed the RCEP agreement in 2020, including 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and 5 of their largest trading partners, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. India opted out of the agreement. Also noteworthy is how the RCEP is now the world's largest trading bloc, larger than other regional trading blocs such as the EU and the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. The next piece was published by Li Hengyang on December 30th, 2021 at 10:56 a.m. Found in the opinion/viewpoint section of the Global Times, this headline reads, Abusing export control measures by certain countries must be renounced. Opening paragraph states, Chinese State Council Information Office on Wednesday issued China's first ever white paper on export controls, which clarifies China's stance on maintaining world peace and development, safeguarding national and global common security. The white paper shares China's ideas and practices in promoting the modernization of its export control system and advocates that all countries join hands in dealing with international and regional security risks and challenges under new situations. Moreover, it promotes the development of the international governance of export control towards a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory direction. Australia is mentioned once, and the paragraph reads, the US is deliberately drawing ideological lines, roping in allies in the export control field to form small circles. In multilateral mechanisms such as the Wassenaar Agreement, the Missile Technology Control Regime, The US has been promoting export control measures that are in line with US interests while attempting to multilateralize its unilateral practices. The US, together with Australia, Denmark, and Norway, put forward the Export Controls and Human Rights Initiative recently, saying it's intended to guide the application of human rights criteria to export licensing policy and practice. Those practices run counter to export controls' initial intention of safeguarding international security. They have turned into political manipulations without a bottom line. They take so-called Western values as the basis for export control, and such practices of politicizing economic and trade issues have aroused dissatisfaction in the international community. Clearly drawing a line in the sand over here, a definite example of othering in practice. No other mentions of Australia is found in this article. Published on New Year's Day 2022. Originally from Xinhua, it's a photo story, and this headline reads, "People celebrate New Year across the world." So a number of images have been provided, such as the fireworks above the Harbour Bridge celebrating New Year in Sydney, fireworks above the Opera House, and there are two other images of celebrations in other parts of the world. No other mentions of Australia in this piece. And this piece would be neutral in nature. That concludes our look at news representations from the Global Times relating to Australia for the week of Monday 27th of December to Sunday the 2nd of January. 21 instances of Australia appearing in the Global Times this week. In contrast, 0 instances of China mentioned in Sky News Australia. The last piece which was mentioned dates back to December 22nd. So it looks like dating from December 22nd all the way through to the 2nd of January. Sky News Australia's attention is not quite focused towards China for the week. So 0 instances of China being mentioned in Sky News Australia. That concludes our look at articles from Sky News Australia and Global Times for the week of 27th December to Sunday 2nd of January. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for your support. If you're enjoying the podcast up to this point, please do not forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a like on the YouTube video. Thank you so much for your support, and this is the Australia China Media Watch podcast, signing out. See you next time.